Welcome back to The Last Faith. My name is Kalar Miadaya, and I live for and in independent games. Today we're doing just a quick overview of the strength weapons in the game. Doing some live recording, unscripted here. Just a last impressions of the weapons available in the strength tree. Just to give you an idea, that is the Skull Cleaver, the Storm Chaser Mace Whip, Ethereal Great Blade, and the Holy Winged Axe. As you notice, all of them at this point are plus 10, and they have their strengths, or their stats as they need. So, just to start with the beginning, I want to start with a disclaimer that, and I know this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, but no weapon in this game is not viable for the game. So feel free to use your own judgment and play as you want. But in overall, we do have some impressions I'd like to share here. Starting first with the axe. Notice here that I am using the coated version of the axe, and we managed to get some impressive damage there. The axe overall is what I would consider one of the starter weapons of the game, and while that is quite literal, there is an additional factor in that I would like to have considered. Most starter weapons in this game, and most other games, are not considered to be the end of endgame tiers. So as that being understood, it will perform a little bit lower than you would expect, say, a weapon that you would find later in the game. That said, I don't rank it the lowest among the weapons available to you in the strength tier. I'm getting myself burned. Let's get rid of that while we speak. As you see, it's got a decent attack speed, a little bit lower than average range, but a decent skill that can both deal out some damage as well as provide you with a bit of initial evasion. It is one of what I would call the burst style of weapon skills in this game. And unfortunately, burst style weapon skills are not the best. They are what I would consider the lowest of the available styles that you would have. But it does not necessarily mean that it is a bad skill. Just that the other ones will, in their appropriate context, perform significantly better. As a weapon, it is fairly average for what you would expect. It does come with the option of being coated with various different types of elements. Of course, that buff is temporary, but it does provide some advantages and disadvantages. The main disadvantage, of course, being that the weapon doesn't perform at its best unless you are pouring resources into it at a continual basis. But as you'll soon discover, that is true with many of the weapons performing at their base, or at their peak. But it does also mean that not only are you burning potential leveling Nyxaroth into focus items, which are going to be a common theme, but it also means that you will be performing lower than your standard without it, and you will also be performing lower than your standard without the coating. As you see here, its speed is thrown off by the fact that it requires more hits in order to kill some enemies. That's usually not a bad thing, as it allows you to do more evasions when you need. But in this case, because the weapon's overall damage on average is a bit lower, it keeps it from really excelling, especially in place of other weapons here. So we'll move on to that. I would actually consider it third actually beneath the weapon I'm going to be using here. Now, this is a bit controversial, but I find the Ethereal Great Blade, while it is the most popular weapon in the game, it's actually the worst in terms of what it can do for you overall in the game. And this is due to the fact that it is a single scaling weapon with lots of bonus damages, but not much direction on where it can go. It actually has a worse skill, still being burst style, than the axe. I'll show you why in a moment. And while it can do great damage if you land it appropriately, as so, it is also several times more costly. So using it on the regular, like you would other skills, is just not feasible. It is also a very long animation time that, while you can cancel it, it also prevents you from using its entire damage, making its cost far more difficult. Oop. And that cost starts at the beginning. So, while I am clearing well here, it is costing me a lot, both in health and in focus, to do so. Of course, the main advantages of this weapon has its large amount of reach and decent damage for that reach, but you'll understand that that damage isn't actually the best in any regard. And while it costs you also in speed to perform that reach, it also costs you in terms of skill. Like the axe before it, it also requires to have a coating to deal the best damage available to it. But if used appropriately, it can have a great effect. You just need to know how to. One thing that we'll be able to provide you after this portion of the video will be back-to-back runs of the bonus boss Nyxaroth with each of these weapons. And you'll see exactly what I mean in terms of longevity and overall damage performance between these weapons. Believe it or not, the Great Blade actually performs the worst out of those four weapons. Now, there's also the issue for its damage. While it does deal impressive damage, it does cap off rather early in the game. The level cap for most stats is going to be 50, where you can get bonuses afterwards, but it begins to severely decline. For example, while I am hitting about 500-ish for each of these, you're only going to gain, say, another 50 at max damage with stats going from this current setup, which is 50 for strength, to 99. So even if you pump an additional 40 levels into your strength, you're only going to see about 45 to 50 damage improvement, which boils down to about 8.5%. So overall, while this weapon is often crutched upon, I do not believe that it performs well enough for its current justification. While it did well at the beginning of the game, since its first initial balance patch, it still doesn't perform the level it used to, and therefore I would highly encourage people to explore other weapons. Back to the next on the group, we're going to start going into the more specialty weapons, where they number 3 on the list of 4, which I actually rank second, is the Storm Chaser Mace Whip. Now, the reason why it is 3 and not 1 has more to do with its cost than its performance. I'll show you what I mean here. As we go up, we will fight our next one here. Note how easy that was, and I do have some mana left on that. I did dip a little bit into my reserves. but it had outranged even the Great Blade, and is outdamaging it for its hits. Now, the cost, of course, is the fact that it is mana hungry, or I should say focus hungry. And now we need to restore the mana that it's being used. Of course, anybody who's seen the playthrough knows that that is a matter of playstyle, and you can restore fairly easily, and you get plenty for it. That said, the other issue that it provides is the fact that this requires 3 stats to be at this level of effectiveness, while its primary stats in there is instinct and strength. You also have to have a fairly good balance of mind in order to have a good reservoir of focus to use the skill with. Outside of the skill, the weapon is fairly average, about what you would expect from the axe as well. It does have the advantage of dealing electric damage and building up a small amount of electrocution status effect, though that is a lot easier to build up when you're using the skill. It also prevents you from using any of the powders, coming with its own bonus damage effect natively. But its adaptable range, adaptable damage performances does work fairly well when you actually use it natively. But what keeps it from being the absolute best available to you isn't necessarily its range or its damage performance or anything like that, as it excels in all of those, but the level of investment it requires is highest among the 3 weapons. So, while this build works really well for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will work well for anybody who uses it. This requires additional grinding and additional circumstances in terms of resources in order to play effectively. And unlike the best of these 4 weapons, the additional status that you want doesn't benefit the weapon in any other way aside from enabling it to use its skill. It is similar to the difficulties of what you would have for, say, the Great Blade, in that the fact that you would have to put in stats somewhere where that isn't overall helpful in order to help the weapon perform at its peak. But once you do, its performance is unmistakable. That said, it still pales in overall comparison to the top billing of the 4, the Holy Winged Axe. Now, while not sporting the same range effectiveness as the Storm Chaser base whip, the Holy Winged Axe actually has better overall performance due to the ease of its skill use function and the massive amounts of damage it has available to it. Also, that effect is just funny. But to show you an idea of how skill usage plays with Storm Chaser, or not Storm Chaser, I guess we have. Sorry, I was silent there just to give you an idea of how that example works in real time. Obviously, while range is king in some situations, it pales in comparison to the raw DPS, the skill combinations that also empower the Storm Chaser Mace Whip does, particularly for the winged axe on its own, namely the fact that its projectiles can all hit individually on the same target, regardless of the size of the target, if you're good at placing it. So with judicious use of when you use the skill, how you restore your health, and your focus, you can easily see the increase in performance. Oh, and I'm not doing well with my own performance here. Other things to keep in mind. We can see that there are heavy crit attacks that are possible and more frequent with the last two of these weapons. I'll show you the stats on them in just a moment. So, if you look at the critical hit effect of the weapon, the chance is at 10 for both the Holy Winged Axe and the Storm Chaser Mace Whip. Well, 9 for the Storm Chaser Mace Whip. But it's at 5 for the Ethereal Greatblade and 6 for the Skull Cleaver. Note also the lower crit damage scaler for those weapons. When paired with charms such as the Grey Moon Charm, which is going to be your best DPS increase weapon, this pulls items like Holy Winged Axe, Storm Chaser Mace Whip ahead, and even just standard damage over time. And while there is a use case for having large range, that will often cost you more time in the combat and therefore expose you. So, in the next clips, you'll see example fights against Nyxaroth, the hidden boss of the Last Faith, and will give you an idea of how each of the weapons work in a long, protracted boss battle, with ads in them as well. Go ahead and take a look for yourself and judge. Once again, thank you for following me along on the strength playthrough of The Last Faith. We'll see you again for Dexterity. Take care.